This is In the Black with T. Dallas Smith. Conversations with trailblazers, glass ceiling breakers, and champions for change who inspire and cultivate leaders every day.
I'm back in the black with Egbert Perry, the chairman and CEO of the Integral Group. He's been sharing his inspiring journey from growing up in Antigua to becoming a leader in urban development and community economic revitalization in the United States. Now, Egbert, you shared the story of ending up working for the great Herman J. Russell in Atlanta. But now I want to get to the next chapter of your life and founding Integral Group with your friend, Clyde Gomes.
Well, it was a hard decision to leave. I had been with Russell for 7 days short of 13 years when I resigned. I stepped down the end of 92, and I left to start a company that was going to revitalize urban America. The one thing that was clear to me is I was fortunate in my early days to have the best education I could have gotten on the island, which was as good or better than the best high school education you could get here, ironically. And because of a set of values, was able to still make a way in life. And I could see over my tenure in the country, so many people that because of race and economic circumstances had their trajectory set on a downward path before they even came out the womb. So the ability to get that trajectory up level or even vertical with a positive slope was very, very slim. And it required a whole lot of luck and intervention and so on. And so I was going to create communities that were going to help those people of that same set of circumstances as I had growing up, black and poor, to have an opportunity to have a better shot at life the way I did. Okay? And so that was the passion that drove me to leave Russell. And it would have to have been something like that because of how wonderful the opportunity at Russell had been for me. So I left to start the company that I co-founded with my good friend Clyde to sort of revitalize urban America. That was all we knew we were saying. And we had a vision of what the elements of that would be. And that ended up.
So it was Clyde who said, I envision you guys were sitting on a park bench one day. This is in my head, the story I've heard you say. You sit on the park bench one day, or you're driving around, and Clyde says to you, Egbert, what would it take this side of the neighborhood to look like that side of the
That's right. It was in New York, and we were going to a meeting at the IBM building on the east side of Manhattan. And he, not knowing what the end game was, but just had a trick up his sleeve, he drove me through Harlem. We arrived at the east side of Manhattan, and then he said, okay, so what would it take to make that look like this? And I said, man, how the hell do I know that? But let me answer a different question. What would that need to be for me to want to live there? And I started talking, and eventually he does a T with his hands, basically saying, okay, enough already, stop. Right. He said, if you can talk that extemporaneously for that long with that much passion without taking a pause, that's what you should be doing with your life. And I said, okay, tell you what, I will do that if you leave what you're doing and we do it together. And literally that day on the bench right outside the IBM building, we decided he was going to leave the Bank of New York, where he had been in the legal and credit department for 13 years, and I had been at Russell for a similar term. Because Clyde was also at Penn with me, I met him at Riverdale, and we became fast friends at Riverdale. And then he's the reason I went to Penn, because I was only going to go to California because I had 3 brothers at Berkeley at the time. So that's where I was going. My oldest brother had left Stanford to go to Berkeley, and I had 2 other brothers that had made their way there as well. So I was only going there, and Clyde was going to Penn, and he encouraged me to apply to Penn, and I heard from Penn and hadn't heard from Berkeley. I didn't know there was such a thing as a semester system and a quarter system. So my time to respond to Penn came up, and I still hadn't heard from Berkeley. So I had to make a decision, so I accepted at Penn. And that's how I ended up going to Penn. So Clyde and I were both at Penn for 7 years. He was MBA JD after undergrad business school, and I was engineering and business school. So that's it. So we stayed friends, and we talked 3-4 times a week. And then on this trip on Russell Business in roughly 91, we were doing this trip, and that's how this all came up. So we decided we would quit the next year and start Integral. So that's how Integral came into being.
Wow. And then you're the proverbial dog that catches the bus.
Oh, yeah.
With your first project. Talk about the very first project out the gate. The assumption is people who are hearing this doesn't know this story, right? And I want to, maybe it wasn't the first bus that you caught, but I want to talk about the big, you can talk about the first one, but then I want to talk about the big bus.
Yeah, because it wasn't the first, but it was the first bus. Okay. Yeah. So, because I got an opportunity to do some consulting, ironically, from the mayor of Birmingham, Mayor Richard Arrington, because of what I had done in Birmingham. So I had a little consulting contract that paid some bills a little bit. And then I had a project over in the West End side of Atlanta, which was a multifamily rental development. But the bus was the Atlanta Housing Authority's solicitation for a developer to help them reposition Techwood Homes, which was the country's first public housing project in Atlanta of that day, which was the most violent city in America. And Techwood Homes was the most violent address in that most violent city. And Techwood and the sister public housing project, Clark Howell Homes, had a total of 1,100 units, and the average household income was about $4,300 a year. So it was really, really bad situation, dangerous environment, etc., etc. And Clyde said to me, when the RFP came out, and I was made aware of it, really, of the opportunity by a friend named Richard Barron, we decided we were going to respond to it. We said, hell, we've been talking this trash now for a couple of years. We should respond to this. Nobody could beat us on this because nobody, I'm sure, could be thinking about this as deeply and as strategically as we have been, given how we came to the idea of doing this work. And so that's what we responded to. And it was to redevelop this essentially 60 acres to create this new community. And when we got selected, it was like, okay, now we've been talking this stuff for a couple of years. We need to figure out what the hell we've actually been saying. And so now we partnered with Richard Barron, McCormick Barron and Associates, and they were in the development business. So I was able to leverage that because we were basically a 2-person firm. And so to compete nationally against all these other major firms, we certainly needed a partner that could help shore up the resume for competition. But we got it, and then we went on to effectively create something that became the national model for revitalizing urban communities. And when we thought about it originally, it wasn't to do anything with public housing. I had never been to a public housing project in my life at that point. But it was to revitalize distressed urban neighborhoods and change the community to have all the things that we all take for granted when we have a little bit better economics, and try and make that affordable and accessible to lower income households as part of a greater mixed income community, which is how I describe the community I grew up in Antigua. So I was really, it was nothing so wonderful and extravagant and great thinking. I was really trying to create what I grew up in Antigua, which was, common values. You had a vision for your future. You were in a mixed income community, so there were people from all walks of life. And you got up every day, worked hard. Your kids got up every day, went to school, and you were just really raising your family in a healthy and nurturing environment. And so you needed a great school. You needed place, health, wellness, and recreation. You needed gross retail services. You needed nice housing, ownership and rental. You needed all these things. So we had a vision of what all the components were. And the challenge became, okay, how do you really create that? And that's what the work became. And it helped us redefine what community development really was, how you do it, and so on. And we learned a lot by mistakes and by successes. And over the years, the company has grown and we've evolved to do more things. But at the core, it's about impact, and it's about really trying to create that proverbial African village.
I mean, you've done it in such a stellar fashion. Henry Cisneros, who was president, I forget what his title was, but he was
Secretary of HUD.
Secretary of HUD, yeah. He made the comment at your, was it his 25th anniversary?
Yes.
About, as he was speaking, that your motto, impact more than 250 communities across the country, using what he titled the Atlanta model. And so it's phenomenal, man. So I tip my hat to you on that. And I just want the world to know where all the genesis of this thing came from. And when I look at other communities like East Lake, the influence that you had over a lot of these mixed income communities, not just here in Atlanta, but across the United States. So,
well, Dallas, but in all fairness,
yes,
I never want to overstate. I don't want to take full credit for that. No question, the vision or the initial thought about how to do it came out of my head, but the first work was done in the Hope 6 program, which is a HUD program. I was made aware of that program by Richard Barron. HUD had to change a whole lot of rules for this to happen. So Henry Cisneros and Kevin Marchman and some other people, they were pivotal for this being even possible. My greatest partner in all of this was Renee Glover, who was the CEO of the Atlanta Housing Authority. If she wasn't there, you can have a great idea, but you have to have a place to apply it. And she made that possible. And then there are a whole lot of other people, some mayors, Mayor Bill Campbell, Shirley Franklin. I mean, there were people that if you pulled out any one of those essential players, this would never have happened. And so there's so much luck and so much intervention to make this possible. And by the way, there were a lot of detractors. In some respects, there still are. I'm cool with what it is we're doing, and I'm cool with the impact. Wish it could be more, but, there were a lot of lessons learned. But no, I don't want to stand up here and just take credit for whatever some people are prone to do. The reality is, yes, I had the vision, and was willing to do the work and had some successes with the help of a whole lot of people.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, man. And it's a beautiful thing, beautiful thing. I want to talk about, I'm going to pivot a little bit, because you've had national, global influence. When I think about your time as chairman of Fannie Mae, how you influenced a lot of housing policy and things like that. Talk about what that position kind of meant to you and how it even helped you look at in terms of your core business, how it helped to maybe look through maybe a different lens?
The Fannie Mae opportunity came to me in a sort of a strange way. I was on the board of the Federal Reserve, had been for about 7 years, the Atlanta Fed, and was asked, as my time at the Fed was ending, I was one of the 10 people recruited to go on the board of Fannie after the government had taken over Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the GSEs, to help reform the housing finance system in the face of the coming Great Recession. And so I got picked through a strange set of circumstances. A friend of a friend asked me to do it, and I said, listen, I've been on the board of the Fed for 7 years. I need to go back and pay more attention to running my company. I'm not interested. They said, well, I already gave you a name, so you're going to get a call. Then I got the call. I told that person I wasn't interested. And then the two of them called me together a couple of days later, and I went on the board. So I was a board member for ultimately 10 years, the first 5 as a regular board member, and then I was asked to serve as chair for the last 5. So here I am now in what I guess is the largest financial institution in the country, a $3.2 trillion enterprise, and watching during the recession.
You said 3.2?
Yes.
3.2 trillion.
Yes, that's Fannie.
I want to make sure people heard that's not a M or a B, that's a T.
Yes.
3 trillion. Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
so,
I'm with you.
So Fannie Mae backs about a third of all of the 54 million or so mortgages held in this country. And the process by which it securitizes those and sells them into the market. And so it's a big, big, big business. But one of the things I observed that was painful to watch was the segment of the U.S. population that was intentionally denied access to opportunity for mortgages and so on. So the last people to have access to the rungs of the ladder for upward mobility, the African-American community, had just gotten in the game, had through home ownership, which is how a lot of people have built wealth. And when the Great Recession, I watched all these foreclosures that could not just be stopped dead in their tracks, happening and wiping out so much of the wealth that had been built up over what was, in effect, a relatively short period of time. And boom, a third of that wealth was going out the door because of the Great Recession. That was painful to be sitting in a front row seat watching that. So it was an experience that was, on one hand, contribution to the country in the sense that I worked with a lot of great people, and the mission was to save the mortgage system and, by extension, the financial system that was both national and global financial system that was in crisis. So it had a pivotal role in helping to do that. So that was a good feeling. The bad feeling was what I described a moment ago. And that service went from December of 2008 to the end of 18.
So I've got just two more questions I want to ask. What do you believe is the biggest misconception about urban development and revitalization?
Well, I have a view of the world we live in, and we live in a world that's been constructed in a very bad way for people. It's about heaven and hell, and we've spent a lot of time creating heavens and hell. Intentionally, for sometimes intentionally, and often for all the bad reasons. And so the people living in hell are desperately trying to get out of hell and make their way to heaven. And the people in heaven are trying to make sure that the people from hell don't come into heaven and mess up their heaven. And the urban core is where a lot of that conflict exists. All of the policies and practices and biases and so on come together in this pot, melting pot, that when you take on a project in the urban space, you're actually confronting all of the things, the good, the bad, and the ugly, that are at the core of who we are as a country. So if there's racial bias, class bias, if you have neighborhood issues that you need to confront, if there is environmental challenge to deal with, if there's all of these different issues that become, let's say, the educational system, public education system, the healthcare sector, all of these things have a weighting on how you responsibly change or develop or revitalize urban communities. And so you may think you're going in to do a real estate project. In reality, you're going in to tackle, as I said, the good, the bad, and the ugly of our policies and practices over many decades. And so urban development is infinitely more complicated than just straight commercial real estate development, because you have to deal with all of these other issues. And people don't really understand that.
Right. And I think about one of the things you've said, kind of going back to tech with homes, just two of the issues that I always found just fascinating when we talk about heavens and hells, that if you lived in affordable housing before you did what you did, two things you couldn't have air conditioning and you couldn't have carpet.
Yeah, that was an eye-opener for me. And really, you could have it, but in the tax credit program in Georgia, you had to comply with modest design. So if you were getting tax credit subsidy, then modest design did not include carpeting and air conditioning. So we had to apply for a waiver to include carpet and air conditioning in the development. I think about that in hot Atlanta, okay?
Georgia.
That's right, in Georgia. But, I mean, these things were from a different time, and, poor people weren't supposed to be able to have access to those things. That was the thinking. And, all of our thoughts evolve over time, but that was just one of those things left on the books. And, the fact is, the reason we were able to get it done is we said, we're doing mixed income housing. So today, a unit may be occupied by one of those people that you think shouldn't have air conditioning or carpet, but the next day it could be a market rate household, and you can't lease a unit to a market rate household without carpet and air conditioning. So let us do carpet and air conditioning across the whole project. So, okay, that makes sense. And then that really started removing that from the way of business as usual.
That's a phenomenal thing. So my next to the last question. That's what I was the next one.
I can tell you can't count.
Looking back, I know I can't count. So don't hold that against me. But looking back at your career, what advice would you have given to a younger Egbert Perry?
I am glad the older Egbert didn't exist to give the younger Egbert advice, because I didn't know what I didn't know. So in some respects, the Lord created the world the way he did. It works, right? Because, they say the youth is wasted on the young and so on and so on. But the truth is, you get the knowledge you get when you're old and you've accumulated that knowledge because of the journey you made all the way through the preceding years, right? And so I don't know if I would have set out exactly the way I did and learned as much as I did way back when I decided I was going to do urban development. Now, maybe I would have. I don't know. But I would certainly have done it differently, because one of the things I did not appreciate, and I would caution the younger Egbert about if I had that opportunity, is this is complicated work. Relationship management is critical. If you are working at the intersection of economics and social, in a highly politicized environment, you really have a lot of people that you think would be and should be supportive of the vision that will work completely at odds with what you're doing. I would never have expected the kind of resistance, the contention that we confronted in doing work that we were doing for all the right reasons. But the battles, the attacks came from some of the places and spaces you would never have expected. And so I would have told myself that good promotion, marketing, communication would be essential, because when you're doing this kind of work, there are a lot of pimps that will jump on a story or a message, make a story out of it other than what it is, and put the whole thing in jeopardy, really hurting the very families that they themselves also claim to care about. And so that has been the biggest disappointment. It's a lot of hard work to make limited progress, in large part because the forces are organized to do the wrong thing more than do the right thing.
To sustain the heaven
and the hell. That's better said, because what we're doing is operating in the middle ground that takes some of the things of heaven and trying to help some of the people that are in hell to create a more sustainable community that exists in the middle. That's why mixed income. And so when you do that, you are challenging all of the systems and institutions that were organized for the existence of heavens and hells, not these places in the middle where you have some of both, which I think are sustainable communities. Heavens and hells aren't sustainable. There's always going to be conflict of people from hell trying to get to heaven and people from heaven trying to keep the people that are living in hell out, because that's the world we have intentionally created. Okay? And the people in heaven think that they're there because somehow they made all these great decisions and they're entitled to be in there, and that the people in hell are there because of the bad decisions they made, and don't really understand that that's an engineering of the world that was done for which they're benefiting and these other people are suffering.
So the book, I'm going to end this on this. Egbert Perry has a book that's going to be coming out pretty soon. We've been talking about it for a while. He's written like 1,000 pages. It's some ridiculous amount. But you can just from listening to this, he's got a lot of content. But one thing he talks about in this book is market permission. I want to end this talking about market permission, if you feel good about talking about that. And when will we see the book? When will the book be coming out?
Man, will you leave me alone and stop pressing me on that? It'll come out when it comes out. I don't know. So hopefully sometime this year. I'm trying to decide how much I want to have a bullseye placed on me, because I'm being very straight, as I always tend to be. So I am doing some thinking through exactly what it is. It's a complicated book, and I'm not sure it's worth the excitement to be built around, but I'm going to feel good having done it. And so it should come out later this year.
You can always change the name to protect the innocent.
Yeah, fair enough. It was written by Joe Schmo. No, so market permission is really a concept that I have had to come up with to explain to a lot of people in business who have asked me some questions like, okay, Egbert, how do you get mentored in the real world, in corporate America, or in these institutions? I always feel as though I'm being overlooked and I'm passed over for opportunities. I'm not getting access to the kinds of opportunities that will help me in my career and so on. I feel as though I'm just a number in there stuck in. How do I change that? I get the question so often, or something along that vein, that I thought, okay, I need to be able to figure out a way to communicate this. So I came up with this approach called market permission. And really what I'm saying is you're fighting to get permission to be at the table. We don't naturally have that permission. Again, the way the world was constructed, we were not at the table. We were a commodity. If we're at the table, it's because we were on the table, not sitting at the chair at the table. And so there was no perception that we would ever be at the table, and all the institutions, the clubs, the this and that are organized without any expectation that we should be there. So when we show up, it's not that people are even thinking about us. They're not thinking about us. We are sort of invisible. And so here you are at the table. You're striving to get permission to be at the table. And a lot of us live a life in the corporate world trying to get permission to be at the table when others don't need to get that permission because it was always perceived that they belong at the table. So people call you a DE&I hire or whatever. You have to understand what that is. When somebody says you're a DE&I hire, the person telling you that is probably a country club hire. They got their job because their father is a friend of the such and such. And he said, hey, I want you to look at my son and get my son or daughter this job. And they got the job by referral. They didn't get it because they were the most qualified. But somehow the problem is that's normal. That's expected. The world is organized that way. So anything different from that is considered preferential. And so we have a responsibility as we do business to help give market permission to a whole generation that follows. And if we don't do that, then shame on us. So market permission, I use an analogy, and this is how I'll close it out. And I'm using a name, I've never spoken to the guy, but y'all have heard of Irvin Johnson, otherwise known as Magic. In my late years in college, I reflected on the fact that every major Division I school, when you looked at the basketball teams that came out in 1970 when I came to this country, all the way till the mid to late 70s, every team looked the same. They had a small white point guard, a white shooting guard, and then you'll have potentially some mix between the forwards and the center. Okay? Essentially, black people were supposedly not capable of being point guard because you have to be able to think and be strategic and manage the team and so on and so forth. And of course, we don't have that capability, not at all, God forbid. And you couldn't be the shooting guard because that took a lot of practice and development of accuracy and so on. And we don't have the discipline to do that, of course. So that was affirmative action for white players. They got the first-class citizenship of point guard and off guard. And then black people, if they were good, they had an opportunity to play in some of these other positions that will allow them to compete for. And so here comes this guy, Magic Johnson, 6'9". He's playing point guard. He insists that he's only going to Michigan State if he's allowed to play point guard. What he didn't know is that move, he was actually given market permission to a whole lot of players to play the game the way they wanted to play it, throw the ball behind your back. If you want to make a bounce pass, you don't have to point your toe and flick your wrist to get the ball going where you throw it however you do it. You could change the rules. So all these structures that were set up for you to fit inside of, he actually was dismantling that by the way he played and that he didn't fit the mold. What we have to understand is we don't fit the mold for anything. The DE&I attacks messages to tell you you don't fit the mold, and when you show up, we're going to have a reason to explain why you don't belong, as if somehow they belong because the system is organized that way. So we, Dallas Smith, Egbert Perry, and a whole lot of other people that got in the door, however we got in, have a responsibility to change the game and create market permission for others to follow so everyone doesn't have to go through the same brain damage, the same whatever that we went through.
Well said. So I'm waiting for the book Market Permission to be coming out pretty soon, y'all.
I know.
No, he doesn't even have a title yet. I'm just making it up. Hey, man.
You are a bloody troublemaker. I want you to know that. Okay. Fair enough.
I want the world to know I love this man, big brother to me. I consider myself to be one of his chief mentees, and I look forward to helping to change the world, my friend. One deal at a time.
All of this was about me here, but you know I love you to death, respect all you do. You are, in fact, giving market permission to a whole lot of people, breaking down some barriers, doing a lot of things that are truly transformational. And I admire that, and I'm glad we are the friends we are. And so thank you for being you.
Thank you, my friend. And that wraps up another episode of In the Black. I hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes. If you have the time, we would really appreciate it if you leave us a review so other folks can find us. Thanks for listening. Have a great day, and I pray that you stay in the black.
This has been In the Black with T. Dallas Smith. To find out how you can change the dominant narrative in the commercial real estate industry and challenge the status quo to improve the lives of others, go to tdsintheblack.com. In the Black with T. Dallas Smith is a production of Forbes Books.